Good morning and welcome to this morning's reflection. This morning I would like to begin by reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 1 and verses 15 to 22. The king of Egypt told the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was called Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you act as midwives for the Hebrew women and see them giving birth, if it is a boy, kill him, but if it is a girl, she may live." The midwives, however, feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt had ordered them, but let the boys live. So the king summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you acted thus, allowing the boys to live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are robust and give birth before the midwife arrives." Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives. The people too increased and grew strong, and because the midwives feared God, he built up families for them. Pharaoh then commanded all his subjects, "Throw into the river every boy that is born to the Hebrews, but you may let all the girls live." And so here we see a world power, the Egyptians, actively oppressing another nation, the Hebrews. And they're oppressing them for their own gain, using them as a form of cheap labor, and denying them the rights that are given to the ruling class, to their own people. And the Egyptians were seeing and treating the Hebrews as other, as not of them, as somehow less than human. But that wasn't enough. You see, the Egyptians were afraid of the Hebrews. Even though they were an oppressed and powerless people, they projected all their fears onto them. And so great is their fear of them that they began to practice genocide so that their culture and their way of life would be safe. This is a human characteristic. Humans do this. All humans do this. Or all humans are capable of doing this. Pharaoh begins with those who give life. Those who hold a place of honor in the community. He begins with the midwives. The midwives were not only midwives to the Hebrews, but also to the Egyptians. And the royal command is that the midwives are to kill all the male children. They are to murder them upon their birth. Why only the boys? Well, the boys would grow into adults capable of being soldiers, and so they represent a physical threat to Egypt, the threat of war. But why allow the girls to live? Surely if you want to exterminate a race, you exterminate everybody. But the girls had value to the Egyptians. They could be slaves. They also intermarried with the Egyptians, and this was in fact something that the Egyptians needed because they needed the Hebrew woman to increase their gene pool. The ruling class had intermarried with each other to such a degree that their incestuous relationships had become dangerous. So the girls have a certain advantage for the Egyptian people. And of course, they were probably far less afraid of them. The boys, well, they were very different. The Egyptians projected all their fears onto them, even when they were not legitimate fears. So the midwives were told to kill them as they were born. There have always been societal distinctions between male and female children. Males are often seen as fodder for war, and girls as brood mares, the provider of the next generation. Now, a Hebrew woman was seen by the Egyptians as strong and robust, while the Egyptian woman was seen as somewhat weaker and far less robust. So these harmless midwives that the Pharaoh asks to murder off the Hebrew males were in fact not harmless. They were indeed strong, and they were very, very brave, because they were not subservient. They decided to disobey Pharaoh. And they disobeyed Pharaoh because they had a greater respect for God. And so they said simply no. They had that power even as slaves. But it's interesting that they didn't just say no straight up. They were cunning, they were clever, they were shrewd, they were subversive in dealing with oppression. And they dealt with it cunningly so that they still remained alive themselves. So they didn't make a public stand. They didn't meet oppression head on. They lie a little. They say, oh, the Hebrews delivered before we arrived. And the Pharaoh believes them. Because the Hebrew woman was so strong, Pharaoh believed that they would simply deliver the child on their own, without help from the midwife. But how does God respond to this? He is delighted with this deception. And he responds by giving the Hebrews more children. And the nation grows stronger. God does take sides here. The resistance that the midwives take against an unethical command is blessed by God. God is pleased with their craftiness. What do the midwives do, and what do they symbolize? They symbolize freedom, truth, birth, delivery, and life. And what do? They bring forth life. They are liberators. They mediate. They comfort. They are present. They lie to save lives, and God rewards their lies. They act for God. They act for what is right and what is true. And in so doing, disobey the authority and the law of the land. They rebel. So it is with this action of the Hebrew midwives that the Exodus begins. An act of disobedience to authority, an authority that is oppressive and dangerous. So give some thought today to your own situation. Onto whom do you project your fears? Are there a people, a group of people, who you easily blame for whatever is going wrong in your life? Whom you blame or see as a threat to your own culture, to your own way of being in the world, perhaps to your own religion? Yes, who do you say is a threat to your culture and your way of life? And whom would you be prepared to treat unfairly, even inhumanely, just to secure your own power? Perhaps not you, but perhaps an authority in your own country is quite willing to treat others differently in order to secure their own power. And are you prepared to take a stand against othering? Against the notion that a particular nation, group of people, should be made to feel less in order that I may feel secure. And would you be prepared to be cunning in the stand that you take? Would you be prepared to be shrewd and not meet unethical commands necessarily head on, but in ways that are subversive, but act to protect you and to protect those that you are trying to defend? These are interesting questions, and questions that we need to sit with. And I wonder what answers you would come up with. Amen.